Greetings, everyone. Thank you very much once again for joining our platform. And today we will keep our discussion so short and simple, and it will be based on social grant. I think on the 3rd of May 2025, I've read a report by NBC that our parliament through the National Assembly has welcomed 7 billion allocation to social grant management. So now the figure that we are getting, the 7 billion to social grant management, is an indication that we do have a lot of people in our society who are living into poverty and dire need of assistance. That's why the government is allocating as far as 7 billion Namibian dollars to that initiative. So now this thing of social grant is becoming a topic of interest and concern in Namibia because in some way we seem to be celebrating it as opposed to seeing it as a manifestation of high level of poverty and unemployment in society. So social grant is literally money given to the needy, to the poor, and to the vulnerable members of society. And then when we see that these type of cases are becoming a lot, instead of us celebrating, we must equally be concerned that our society is now drowning into poverty and people are in need of government assistance just for basic needs that they need on daily basis. Of course, social grant is commendable, but if we do not incorporate strategies and initiatives to ensure that a lot of people are in the broader means of the economy to assist themselves as opposed to getting this social grant, then we will be finished. Also, if we continue pumping a lot of money into social grant initiative without having initiatives in place to, instead of giving these grants, but empower these people in terms of creating job opportunities so that these people are able to cater for themselves. Because what happened with social grant is that instead of giving a father a job opportunity so that this father is able to take care of his kids at home, what the government does is that it keeps this father unemployed and then it gives his kids $350 every month. So that is not something to celebrate about. If you give a decent job opportunity to this particular father, then his kids won't need your social grant. It's the same thing we had last time that people were talking about increasing the money that our elderly people get, I think to as far as 3,000. But what we are saying is that people are talking about increasing this money because in the current format, this money does not work for the elderly people because our old people must take care of their grandchildren who are unemployed, and majority of these grandchildren have university qualifications. So they are employable, but they are not job opportunity. So now it does not make sense that you give this grandmother 3,000 and must share with those 5 unemployed graduates in her house, as opposed to you giving these people job opportunities, so that even if you give $1,000, even 500 to this grandmother, it's enough because she does not have to take care of anybody else. Those other people are able to take care of themselves. So now, what we need to perhaps understand is that this social grant is necessitated by the fact that majority of our people in Namibia, they are really living into poverty, and majority of people in Namibia, they are unemployed. So now what we need to put into consideration is perhaps also a little bit of statistics that we have there. Number one, to say that Namibia is topping in terms of unemployment in SADC. Last time I checked, I think it says that around 36 to 7% there of Namibians are unemployed. That is just generally. And majority of Namibians who are employed also, they do not have decent salaries. Of course, a person is employed, but the salary that they are getting is not a decent salary in terms of inflation and in terms of our economy at the moment, where rent is very high, prices of commodities are also very high. Then at the end of the day, the person is employed and the salary is a 3,000 or a 4,000, and out of that they must pay rent, they must also support their families, and the prices of commodities are also high. Of course, a person is employed, but again, this salary is just not decent in terms of commodity prices as well as inflation that we experience. So now what we need to put into consideration is that giving social grant without having mechanism in place to empower people in terms of giving them decent job opportunities with decent salaries is a terrible mistake that we can do. And what is worrisome is that our government in a way also believes in a private sector. Of course, public versus private partnership is good in terms of businesses and economy, but we also need to understand that a lot of these private companies, corporations, and institutions, so they are not in the business of creating jobs or empowering people. Majority of them, they're in the business of making profit by any means necessary. And now relying on private sector to create jobs, I think it's a terrible thing that we can do, because private sector is not there to provide jobs. They are there to make profit. Okay? And if you look carefully into countries that have made it, countries that are progressing now, you can look at your Singapore, for instance, you can look at Norway, you can look into China, India, and so on. So these countries are making it because the government is at the center of economy in terms of policy, in terms of direction, provision, and all of that. Meaning the government does not fold its hands and say, private sector, take over the economy, provide jobs, and all of that. The government is playing an active role in directing what need to happen in the economy. And that is what is helping these countries to catch up. But that is not what we are doing. So we are letting private sector to decide what happens. We do not even look at where do we want to go with our economy and all of that. There's no any proper mechanisms and intervention from the government to that effect. And my fear is that the private sector, especially now in the fourth industrial revolution, is that they are moving into a direction where they will make use of AI as a way to cut the need of manpower. What does this mean? So this means that in the fourth industrial revolution, we have what is known as artificial intelligence. And what artificial intelligence entails is that whatever human beings are doing, we might have machineries and robotics out there that can do the same. So now if I'm a business person having a company, so instead of employing a person who will be doing all sort of work and pay them a salary at the end of the day, I would rather buy a robot or a machinery or install a software in my computers so that this work that otherwise this person was supposed to be doing can be done either by a technology, or it can be done by a robot. Then at the end of the day, I don't need a person and I'm cutting the money that I'm spending on labor. So now with that in mind, one would then begin to be worried as to where are we heading in Namibia, where the government want to leave everything in the hands of private sector, whereby now the private sector in terms of manpower is that these people are trying very hard, and they are moving toward that direction of cutting manpower and replace that with technology. So, and some of these things, just basic ones. For instance, now we are seeing that if you want to buy either your away or your electricity and all of that, you can literally just go to ShopRite or Vurman or Pick and Pay. You would find an automation, a machine, And in that particular machine, you can literally just, choose whether you want electricity, you want aware, you want airtime. And then there you also now just choose, then you insert money, you get your receipt back, you get your token numbers and things like that. You are done with your hour and electricity in terms of purchasing. So now that is the direction where we are moving, where now instead of having a person helping there with your hour or buying electricity, and the owner of this company must pay this person, there's just a machine that does not need, any human being, unless maybe security guards to help where necessary, but they do not need a lot of people to assist in that regard. So we might also find ourselves in areas where private schools, they will be teaching maybe with television in classrooms and things like that. Therefore, they don't need teachers. Maybe we also find ourselves in areas where at service stations, instead of having petrol attendants there helping people with fueling up their cars, then you're also doing the same way. You just insert money, you fuel up, then you go. So now we are heading there in terms of private sector and AI. But if the government cannot really have mechanisms in place at the moment to empower, majority of people out there to provide job opportunities to the people, then I don't see where we are going. And now that we're at this moment, we already have high levels of unemployment and poverty. It's worrisome if we do not have interventions to empower Namibians out there. And it's also equally now important for us to know that our population really is a smaller one, because I think last time I checked, we sent 3.2 million people, like here in Namibia. And then I think 72.2% of those people are under the age of 35. So now what that means is that if you go to Angola, Zambia, and South Africa, so that population could be just, I think Lusaka is more likely the same population. Lusaka is a city in Zambia, I think has 3.2 million people, more or less that number. And then I think if you go here in Angola, I think Luanda is not as a capital city, but as a province. I think it's 2.7 million people. So now if you go to South Africa, you find provinces that has, about 5 million people. But here in Namibia, all of us, we are just 3.2 million people. But again, the government is unable to utilize these resources. We have a lot of resources in Namibia properly in order for us to empower the Namibian people so that they are able to take care of themselves. And now we are seeing a higher level of crimes as well in society. And we are also seeing that a lot of, small boys and girls, they are into alcohol consumption. They are into all these wrongdoings simply because a society that is characterized by poverty cannot flourish, cannot have order, because parents are not even at home. And when a person has nothing to eat, at the end of the day, there's nothing that they can do apart from going out there to steal so that they are able to sustain themselves. So what I'm saying, to summarize, because I don't want us to take time, is that the 7 billion Namibian dollars allocated to social grant management should be seen as a manifestation of higher levels of unemployment and poverty in Namibia. And I'm also saying that if we want to manage this properly, so we need to have mechanisms in place as to how can we give social grant, but at the end of the day, we are addressing the root cause as to why people need social grant in the first place. And the second point is that the government must stop this understanding that the private sector is there to assist in terms of community empowerment and job creation, because unfortunately the private sector is there just to make profit. So what the private sector is interested in is making profit. Some of them, they don't even pay attention to corporate social responsibility. Some of them don't even pay attention to economic, social, and environmental governance. They don't pay attention to that. All they're interested in is into profit making. So now the government need to be aware of that, to say private sector, unless directed by means of law, private sector would continue to do whatever is in their power to ensure that they continue to make profit at the expenses of job creation, economic empowerment, and all of that. And another fear is that we are now in the fourth industrial revolution, where AI is playing a fundamental role into means of production and service provision. And now by that, we mean that at some point, these private sectors would be using technology and robotics as a way to provide services and as a way to engage into production. Therefore, they are cutting this manpower. They don't need a lot of workers anymore. They'll be using robotics and technology. And the government, if they still believe that the private sector can play a role into job creation and community empowerment, I think that is a joke. And we are also saying, let's look into countries that are progressing. Like we spoke about your China, we spoke about Singapore, we spoke about Norway, and so on. You will see that the government plays a central role in terms of policy directives as to what and where we must go in terms of the economy. And the last point is that in a community and in a society where the levels of poverty are just so high, then you don't expect that society to have order, for us to be safe and all of that. These things of crime will be very high because people do not have, their basic needs covered. People are not employed. So these young boys and girls that are just drinking alcohol, grabbing phones and all of that, those are some of the people that we can keep busy into factories and plantations working. But the moment we leave them as such, without food, but without also a job, then what else can they do apart from going out there and steal? So that is just what I wanted us to look at. Let me hear your comment and your point of view on the matter.